Hi Tarot Trainees. Today I'm going to attempt to teach you the Major Arcana through first just discussing what the concept of the Fool's Journey is and why it's used, and then I'll take you through a brief overview of each card just from my perspective, from what I've learned, and then we'll go through a couple of exercises which will hopefully help you to get the maximum that you can get out of the lesson and to help you to absorb what you've learned for yourself. So the first thing is first, the Fool's Journey. Most people with even a remote interest in tarot will have heard of the Fool's Journey, and some of you will already know what it is, and some of you will have already learned some form of it. And others of you will be like, what the hell are you talking about? The Fool's Journey is a concept that has been devised to help us to interpret and break down and kind of assimilate the messages of the 22 majors into one overall kind of linear journey or pathway. So it helps us to navigate the major arcana, and it helps us to think of each of the messages as a pathway on the road to a more succinct understanding or towards the process of individuation, if you like. So the Fool's Journey, I'm not 100% sure where it will have originated, but there are several forms it can take. There is an idea that's put forth, and this might be kind of a little bit deep for a beginner's course, but I'm mentioning it as a springboard in case you want to go off and do your own thing with it, called the Hegelian dialectic, which is basically based on Hegel's ideas of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. So when we put that into the Fool's Journey, we're actually breaking the 22 majors up into conscious, unconscious, and then collective unconscious or universal. So that's one idea. Another idea that a lot of tarot readers kind of put forth and are proponents of when it comes to breaking down the 22 majors is to cut them right down the middle, right where the Wheel of Fortune is, in fact, and look at that as the two stages of life. So the earlier cards kind of pertain to your youth and your adolescence, the way you relate to the material world, the way you relate to your ego, and then the latter half of the journey is supposed to relate to, the kind of the breakdown of living. Having a look at what's delusion and what's not, having a look at your inner self, and preparing, of course, for the winter of your life. So that's another way that you can break it down. And there are others as well. There's a Hermetic tradition which teaches the Fool's Journey or the Major Arcana as, I believe, 2 rows of 9 and then a row of 4, which has something to do with their particular symbolism that they favour. So I'm just putting this out here as a kind of suggestion to you that the Fool's Journey is a very colourful and kind of very multifaceted idea. It's not just one idea, it's actually an umbrella term for many ideas of how you can break down these 22 cards into some kind of linear structure, and it gives you some kind of idea of how to think of them overall as a journey. The way that I'm going to teach the Fool's Journey is the most simple and most standardised method, which is known as the 21 doors. The 21 doors is the most popularised form of teaching the Fool's Journey. Basically, it suggests that this guy here, the Fool, is the person that's on the journey, and he begins obviously full of potential, a totally blank canvas, the way everybody does on their journey towards individuation or consciousness, if you like. And then he goes through each of the 21 doors, and these are the 21 doors, in a linear fashion, and he finds something about life behind each of them. He finds a lesson, he finds something he can work with, he finds a message that he can absorb behind each of the 21 doors. Now, I'm going to teach this 21 doors method to you because it's as simple as literally telling a little bit of a story, if you like, putting forth some ideas on each card that are going to help you to understand that each door represents a different message in the tarot deck. But I will just state before I begin that I'm not entirely sure that teaching the Major Arcana as a linear pathway from one card to the next is particularly helpful, and there are a lot of people that are with me on that and are proponents of it, but I'll come to that later. Okay, so let's begin with the message for each card. The Fool we can think of as our possibility. He is the sense of possibility and of overwhelming potential. He is the very beginning, but he also represents the end too. So if you think about the way life and death tend to meet up, or if you think about the way 0 can sometimes be a description of infinity, the Fool is the 0 card. He is not a numbered card, and that's for a very important reason, because he's often seen as the hero of our story, and the Major Arcana is kind of like the hero's journey, if you will, and that's what we're attempting to navigate here. So the Fool is the genesis, he's the primordial soup. He is a representation of the beginning and of all potential and of all possibility and of everything that could come and everything that has been before that's led us to this starting point. don't don't think of the fool's journey as like a journey from birth to death. That's not actually what it's a description of. The fool is not meant to represent an infant or a newborn child. You know, it's not supposed to be kind of a life map from literal birth to literal death. The fool is more a suggestion of the beginning of somebody's journey towards true consciousness or true individuation or of true being. So a kind of reconciling all the different parts of themselves into an understanding of who they are and how the environment around them works. So you can be the fool on your journey at any time in your life. You may have been the fool a few times on the journey. You may have been at that starting point, at that great beginning, as it were. So that's kind of more what the fool pertains to. The first card that we come across, the first door that the fool opens, he walks in on this magician in this lush garden with all of these different tools, who's obviously very adept at what he knows, and he's obviously very skilled. The magician is a symbol of pure will. The magician is a symbol of creativity and the imagination and the creative seed almost. Now, don't forget that when you learn the major arcana for yourself and you're going through these cards for yourself, there are going to be many different associations that you place onto each card for yourself, and your understanding of each message is going to expand massively as you go through your journey with the tarot. So these are just a few sentences briefly on each card and how I can help you to see each one as a door through which the fool walks in order to gain some vital information about life or the environment around him or about himself. So the magician is pure will and pure intention. So it's basically almost as if the fool has grasped hold of some kind of a desire to manifest something, but there may not be any solid direction yet, but it's almost like he's coming into some kind of power just as the result of setting off on this journey. He's coming to possess some of his personal power in a way, but at the moment it may not be offered a direction, it may not have guidance, it may not have any ethics attached to it or eventual idea of where that power is going to go or how it's going to use itself. And the high priestess is the obtaining of intuition. So whereas the magician is more about what can happen in tangible life, in physical reality, the high priestess is the fool's first stirrings of intuition. So he may have opened the door and met this woman who's sitting in front of a magnificent library, but she's got her back turned to all of the books because she knows that as much as she reads, as much information as she amasses, she's never going to be able to find the answers in those books to the questions of her heart and of her inner work. That is a task for her intuition, and that's why she has her back turned to the books, and that's why there's a crescent moon at her feet as well to represent intuition and the female thinking faculties. The fool may sit at the high priestess's feet. This is quite a popular one in the 21 doors, the idea that he walks into the library, he meets this very kind of a woman with a very strong energy, a woman who's clearly very wise, clearly very in touch with her emotional spectrum and with her sixth sense, if you will, or her third eye. And he sits at the feet of the high priestess, and the high priestess basically tells him, the answers that you need are within. And he kind of goes with that. He understands that now, that intuition is just as much an important part of his mind as his analytical faculties or his rationality, his logic, etc. The Empress, and in fact I'll do these together, the Empress and the Emperor are representations of the mother and father. So this is where we come on to things like role models and accepting yourself as part of a larger unit, or accepting yourself as part of the earthly realm in terms of how you are with other people. It's about social structure in a way, but it's also about how you learn your ethics and your moral code in a sense, so how you learn from those around you and how you're interconnected with everything else. The mother represents, the mother represents nurturing and love and compassion, and the idea that everybody on their journey will have people who kind of nurture their potential and who do act as a kind of motherly guide. And the Emperor represents order, he represents discipline, he represents more of that structured learning that a father figure can kind of give to you, or a figure with a very masculine energy may give to you. And I also believe, and a lot of people do, that the Empress and the Emperor part of the Fool's journey is just as much about leaving the parental standpoint and going your own way as it is about actually accepting what your mother and father, your role models, your parental figures have taught you and given you for the journey. So when the Emperor and Empress appear in this linear structure, we're also looking at the time when the Fool will let go of his the role he played in the home, if you like. We're looking at the time when the Fool is going to forge forward, and he's going to almost shake off the bonds of familial obligation and become very much his own man, or her own woman, if you want to see it like that. The Hierophant is a representation of learning. So if you think about a child, for example, will spend the first 5-6 years of its life not learning in any structured fashion, just kind of learning from those around it and its environment, but eventually it will have to go to school. So if you think about the Hierophant as school, and I know that doesn't seem very attractive as a way to think of him, but he is essentially the teacher of great disciplines, and he is the knower of great secrets, and he has smooth mastery over the disciplines that he's teaching to his students. So the Hierophant is about learning, and it's about structured, disciplined learning. It's about the pursuit of knowledge. And so that's kind of the stage in the Fool's journey that he'll be at. When he opens this particular door, he meets a teacher, he becomes part of a class, he kind of propels himself forward into a much more rigid manner of study, where he actually applies himself, and he kind of gets that kind of maturity and intellectual sophistication that he didn't have before. So that's what happens when he opens that door. And behind the door pertaining to the Lover's card, the Fool will probably discover that love is possible with other people. And he will probably embark upon a relationship, or watch other people embarking upon relationships, that kind of thing. And he will realise that there is a lot of give and take in the world, and that there is a lot of interconnectedness. And interconnectedness may be based on compromise, or it may be based on passion. This is where he gets his sense that he's not actually alone in terms of people outside the family structure. Or outside of his areas of learning, that there is a lot going on which pertains to friendship and love, and having to recognise that who you are doesn't just matter in terms of who you are as an individual, it also matters in terms of how you treat others and what you expect from others. Behind door number 7 is the Chariot, and this is where the Fool recognises that the pursuit of a goal is not only enjoyable but also highly necessary for contentment in life often. And the Chariot is obviously a very strong symbol of forward motion. It's a very strong symbol of pursuing what you want to manifest, and it's a strong symbol of independence as well. The Fool is beginning to not just think a couple of steps ahead, he's playing 4, 5, 6 moves ahead. He's having a look at the journey for what it's going to give him in the future. He's getting a sense of his own direction, and that he's entitled to go his own way. He's entitled to follow his own way on the map, if you like. So this is where he really gets the reins to his own chariot, and he really begins to feel that he's coming into his own in terms of having the power to decide on left or right, to decide on, you know, which way looks like the best way for him. So he's taking on a little bit more of that that inner power, if you like, that I discussed with the Magician. Strength is where he begins to learn that the concept of balance and endurance is vital. When we're looking at the amount of power that's being put behind the Chariot card that came before, we're looking at the amount of drive and the amount of passion that's being placed into the pursuit of a goal. Strength is the next logical step on that journey for the Fool, because when he opens the Strength door, he's going to realise that along with that drive and that ambition comes a great need for endurance and responsibility and balance, you know, and understanding what's too much and what's diplomatic and fair, understanding what is overexertion and what is a decent amount of work to put into a project. So he's actually looking at his boundaries, he's embracing his power with the Chariot, but then he's accepting his boundaries and limitations with strength, and also coming to understand how to deal with those who have not yet accepted their boundaries and may be very domineering, or may in turn be very passive and may be allowing themselves to be abused. So he's understanding the meaning of the word strength, basically, and he's going to put that into action. Behind the 9th door is the Hermit, and this is where the Fool opens the door and comes into contact with the Sage, or the Wise Man. And the Wise Man can teach him a great many lessons, but the Wise Man, remember, is kind of moved away from society. He's at the summit of a great mountain, he's alone, he's very meditative, a lot of contemplation, he's a mystic, if you will. So the Fool is coming into contact with this first idea that tangible reality and things that you can pursue in the physical or earthly realm are not the only kind of wealth that you can have. The Sage represents spiritual wealth. The Sage represents the the inner workings of the spiritual mind, the contemplation of the great spiritual dilemma. He's on about higher consciousness and that kind of thing. So the Fool, for the first time, comes into contact with a teacher who is not looking to pursue anything on the earthly realm, or is not looking to pursue knowledge that may need to be backed up by empirical fact. He is looking at the next dimension. He is a mystic. He is consciousness expansion in essence. So this is where the Fool realizes that the journey may take 2 or 3 different levels, or have many different tiers, that he can be spiritually rich as well as being materially rich. The Wheel of Fortune is the door that the Fool opens to come into contact with the idea of chance, or fate, or destiny. And this is where things become quite serious. This is in fact a turning point, so it's quite useful that it's a wheel, because that will help you to remember it. It's the turning point in the major arcana in a sense, because it's where the Fool realises that control is not the only animal, that there is another animal called chance, or fate, or the idea that not everything is within his grasp, and he's going to have to accept that the winds of life change very, very fast, and he needs to adapt if he wants his house to keep standing. Metaphorically. So, the Wheel of Fortune is all about the ups and downs, the cycles of life, and it's the moment where the Fool realises that he is not really ever in full control, that he will have to deal with the unexpected, and that's rather a slap in the face for any person that comes to a stage in their life where they realise that. And they may realise it in a number of different ways, but it's also a very exciting time. It's also a very harmonious time, whereby we come to the realisation that it's not always us that's in the driver's seat, and we need to kind of trust the universal laws sometimes. Justice, I would say that when the Fool opens the door of justice, it's like he's actually walking into a courtroom. It's where he realises that, everything to do with harmony with other people, everything to do with fairness and morality, everything to do with his sense of ethical code, a lot of these things he will have learned from the Hierophant at the beginning of the journey. All of these things are important and necessary for him to not only understand how his environment around him works, but also to relate to himself on a much deeper and more profound level. So Justice, I feel, is where he actually comes into contact with Lady Justice and her scales and her sword, and he kind of comes to understand that life is meted out upon certain laws that attempt to give fairness to everyone. And how does he feel when those laws are broken, or how does he feel when he sees that the balance is not quite held up to account? And I think that this is the great moral turning point in the journey. This is where the Fool kind of looks outside of himself, and he's not just looking at his own journey and his own feelings and his own desires. He's also looking at how everything fits together, and how he needs to treat other people, and how he needs to expect others to treat him too. The Hanged Man, as we've talked about a lot on my channel, is an image of suspension and surrender. Surrender is a great word to describe the Hanged Man, because it's basically about standing still, and it's about surrendering to whatever life is putting into the pot at that moment in time. When the Fool meets the Hanged Man, the Fool may be under the impression that he's never going to have to stop. He may be very pumped full of the desire to pursue and the desire to manifest. He may be very confident, and he may feel full of life and kind of almost unable to stop moving. And the Hanged Man may be the person that kind of says to him, hang on, chill out. Sometimes you need to contemplate. Sometimes you are in a state of suspense, and you're going to need to stay there, and you're going to need to work through that. So it's really the first time that the Fool realises that life isn't all go, go, go. Sometimes there are periods where you need to allow yourself that necessary suspension and surrender to what is going on at that moment, the understanding that you cannot always push yourself, that you cannot always have the answers. Sometimes you need to go into a state of gestation, if you like. It's almost as though the moment is pregnant with what's to come, but we haven't quite reached the 9-month stage yet. Death is a very important door, of course, and they all hold equal importance, but I think death is one that comes back to us as human beings time and time again as a door that, when we open it, or when we did open it, it was kind of very shocking, and it changed a lot for us. And death is really an image in tarot of metamorphosis, so it's where the Fool actually realises that change is evident, and that decay is inherent in all component things. And this is a big lesson for the Fool, and it's where he really starts to do his growing up. And you'll notice that after death in the major arcana, many of the cards, or all of the cards, speak much more to our ideas of the subconscious or of the collective unconscious. So it's almost like the lesson of death deepens the plot and broadens the plot and makes the fool realise that there's so much more to life than those concerns he was putting into action at the beginning, like his personal goals, his relationships with his family, and that kind of thing. Death is where the plot is blown kind of wide open, and he begins to realise that through death comes rebirth, and that change kind of propels him forward into a completely different state of being. Temperance is very appropriate with death. It's an angel, and it kind of follows the death card as kind of almost a guidance, if you like, to get through this very tumultuous, very undulating change that death in any form catapults towards us and makes us realise that we need to deal with. Temperance is really about blending and about balance. It's about moderation, but it's also about spiritual calm. It's about playing with the different chalices of life and the waters within them to kind of harmonize and give yourself a balance that works for you. So it is about spirituality, and it is very much about divinity in a sense, personal divinity, and the personal feeling that you're one with everything. But temperance is also really just about relaxation, I believe. I believe that temperance can really be about those calm waters and about looking at trying to calm the storm that happens during death, that metamorphosis, that change, that very unpredictable jolt that you experience when anything that relates to the death card comes up, any kind of change or metamorphosis, any kind of thing that was unpredictable. Afterwards, you need that time with temperance. You need that time to blend and harmonize again and give your life that good stuff, that good relaxation, that perspective, and that moderation that temperance is all about, really. The devil is when the fool opens the door of the devil. The fool is kind of approaching ideas of opposition and resistance. He's approaching ideas of people who may disagree with him, ideas about the world being at war or in resistance in different factions, if you see what I mean. And the devil is also about approaching the shadow aspect, and it's about approaching the fool's bad habits in himself. So it's the first time really that he gets down with the idea that he's not really comfortable with all of himself, and that along the journey so far he has recognised parts of himself that he may very much be in conflict with or unable to break himself out of or unable to accept. There may be a lot of denial wrapped up in this card. This is kind of where the fool goes to the dark place, if you will, and of course it's natural that this would happen after death has done its thing, because after a metamorphosis we do begin to reassess and re-engage. We explore. We're no longer comfortable with the ideas we had before because of the change we've experienced and how that's made us grow exponentially. We now need to look at the themes associated with the devil card. What needs to change? What are we unhappy with? What's been lurking at the back of the cupboard like a skeleton that needs to go, kind of thing. So there's a lot of that kind of tied in with it. The Tower, of course, and I think the big three, Death, the Devil, and the Tower, are all kind of interconnected in the sense that they all talk about instability, destruction, rebirth, metamorphosis, and the comfort factor that we have with our own true natures and how we're actually getting on with thinking about that. The Tower, in a sense, being the third of the three, can be about material instability, and it can be about losing what we've worked for in the earthly realm. So behind this door the fool will see people that may have lost everything in a natural disaster, which very much pertains to the Rider-Waite imagery there. But he may also meet people who've lost everything in a familial sense. They may have lost somebody close to them. They may have lost the perception of themselves that they held on to tightly. They may have lost their sense of identity, and that might be scary too. There's a sense of loss and a sense of instability here, a sense of chaos, if you will, but there's also a sense of rebuilding the strong foundations after death or after that metamorphosis. So once that shocking jolting change has done its thing, we do need to put strong foundations into place. And often the Tower can be a warning card for that. It can kind of be the door that the fool walks through and realises, okay, if I don't make the necessary changes, both inner and outer, after I experience this very kind of illuminating metamorphosis, then this is going to happen to me. You know, if I don't create some stability for myself, and if I don't realize what I've got after unexpected change occurs, then I'm not going to have allowed myself to grow from this lesson. So again, it's a hard one for the Fool to learn. It's a difficult door for him to walk through. And when he first walks through, he will be kind of overwhelmed and very afraid. But soon he'll come to the realization that unpredictable and chaotic change is the nature of life. It's what you actually do with it that counts. It's what you learn from it that counts. And it's the foundations you put into place to prevent any kind of mental or emotional trauma after unpredictable change has taken place. So it's about the core of this building. It's about the strength that he's put down, so that when it all goes to shit, he still has that inner core. And the star, the next part of the journey, when the Fool opens this door, he's walking into an area of healing and rejuvenation and hope. So after the big three have done their work to kind of turn everything upside down for the Fool and make him feel very out of sorts and probably quite shaken and stirred, the star, think of it almost like a relaxation spa that he's walked into, kind of thing. He's walked in and it's all very kind of bucolic and relaxing, and everything is to do with his holistic well-being and about helping him to come back to a sense of balance. So the star is about healing, and it's about retreating in a sense almost from that chaotic stuff for a while, giving himself that time to find his centre and giving himself that time to heal. So it's actually a very appropriate and soothing card to come after the big three. And if you kind of look at, I mean, Temperance is there too, is another great healing card that comes in the midst of the big three. But if you have a look at the kind of the scary imagery and the scary colours that you see in these cards, the big three are quite domineering colours. There's a lot of black, white and red in there. There's thunderbolts in there. There's death. There's people succumbing to bondage and slavery and that kind of thing. And then if you just have a look at the soothing kind of cooling effect of the star right afterwards, you can see that it's absolutely appropriate that the star should come after that kind of more tumultuous stage, almost from the Wheel of Fortune onwards really, where the Fool kind of feels very on edge and he's learning a lot of new information, and not all of it's good, some of it's quite scary. The Moon comes after the star, and the Moon really is the aspect of psyche. It does tap into the unconscious, but it also taps into our relationship with our own cerebral realm, so the mental faculties, if you like. And it's also to do with what's true and what's not, and that's something that's going to come up a lot for anyone at any stage in their life. When the Fool opens this door, it's the first time he really recognises that his truth may not be necessarily everybody else's truth, and that there are certain aspects of his beliefs that may be limiting or that may be, in a sense, unfair or inaccurate. So he really has to address what's going on in his mind at this moment, and he has to embrace his psyche, have a look at both the light and dark parts of it. And if you think about the moon, and I always use this as a metaphor for the moon card, if you think about the moon in the night sky, it's beautiful and it's brilliant, it's dazzling and it illuminates. When you first look at it, it's absolutely, it entrances you. But when you look down onto the earthly realm beneath the moonlight, you'll notice that the moonlight obviously gives a light that is very deceptive. It doesn't touch everything. It doesn't show us everything. There are lots of hidden corners and hidden avenues, and sometimes the moonlight can be so bright upon us, but then when we go off into another area, it's very shadowy, and there's not a lot of a sense of what it looks like in the daylight. So even though it's this dazzling and wonderfully comforting and beautiful light, particularly for pagans amongst us, we do have to consider the metaphor of the moon as a metaphor for the half-light in a sense. You know, you are walking around in the dark. There will be certain parts that are illuminated, but there will be certain parts that you don't have access to with your own eyes until sunlight comes and kind of throws that light upon it. So if you get confused about the moon card and the meaning of it as a kind of an exploration of what's real and what's not, what's delusion and what's reality, what's subjective and what's subjective, think about the light of the moon and the way it casts a half light on things, and then think about from that how you would need to explore the parts of your mind or the parts of your belief system that only have kind of a half light cast upon them and need to maybe be soaked in the sunlight a little more, which is where we come on very appropriately to the sun card. I think of the sun card not only as a symbol of a more all-encompassing and universal hope that involves other people, and obviously also it's a card of great joy and great happiness, but I also think of it as consciousness. It's in the last three cards of the Fool's Journey, it's in the last of the Fool's 21 doors, And, you know, the Fool is reaching his process of full individuation now. He is almost about to get the certificate for going through these 21 shades of shit, as I sometimes call them when I'm feeling a little cynical. And he's about to get his degree, if you like. He is about to become an individualized human being. So with the Sun card, I think that this is a representation of consciousness kind of rising, consciousness coming out from behind a cloud. All of these lessons that the Fool has amassed behind his 21 doors have all come together and fit into this wonderful image of illumination, which is really what the sun does. It illuminates, and the Fool is becoming illuminated. He is putting all of the pieces of this Fool's journey into play, and he is kind of making the jigsaw come together, and it's all coming together quite nicely. He's realizing that all of the lessons, both terrifying and exhilarating, you know, both joyful and terrifying, are kind of giving him this overall map that he can use as an individualized, sorry. Judgment is also an image of metamorphosis, like the Death card. But when the Fool comes into this walks through this Judgment door, he's seeing an incredible universal transformation that's happening amongst everybody, and he's seeing that as an image of the collective unconscious. You know, that leaps in our wisdom and in our technology and in our spirituality kind of come to the fore in a very all-encompassing and expansive way. So, and also judgment is about his personal acceptance that he has overwhelmingly changed too. You know, I've said many times that the Death card is about unpredictable change. It's about cycles that we don't always foresee, and it's about how we deal with that in the aftermath. Whereas judgment often is much more of a change that we put into being or that we accept in ourselves. So we actually see this change take place in ourselves, which is fantastic. And the Fool, obviously being right at the end of his journey now, is beginning to realise that he's changed as a result of all of these doors that he's opened. And he's coming to be okay with that. He grappled with it, but now he's coming to accept that the changes that these doors have offered to him have been enriching, and they have invigorated him, and they have given depth to his life. And finally, the 21st door, the 22nd card, but the 21st door, of course, remember, because the Fool is the 0 in tarot, is the World card. And in this card, this woman is completely undergone the process of individuation, and I always think of the scrolls that she's holding as her degrees to kind of reward her for undergoing a process of examining her ego, examining her persona. She's examined the unconscious, she's looked into her hopes, her fears, her feelings about destiny, her feelings about control, relationships, everything, and she's finally come out at the other side, which is where she actually feels that she is wholly turned out, and there is that sense of wholeness. The world is very much about wholeness. It's about consolidating all of the existing parts of your character, your personality, everything you've learned into one whole being that you accept as the whole you, and that you know is going to propel you forward with strength and fortitude, because it is the whole you. There's nothing that you're hiding behind a shroud. There's no man behind the curtain, as it were. So the Fool is very much that image of personal power on a next level, personal power that can really be used to manifest something great, both materially and spiritually. So that is how one would explain the 21 doors. And if you go online and you read The Fool's Journey on any website, there will be kind of very rich, lovely, detailed stories, kind of like, oh, the Fool went through this door and he met the magician, and the magician had all of these tools, and the magician took him to a special room, and there were scrolls, and the magician taught him magic. You know, you can go as deep as you like with it. You can write your own Fool's Journey, and using the imagery on your particular deck, you could go absolutely anywhere with it. You could say that the Fool opened the door and saw, you know, the Grim Reaper with his long scythe cutting down people in a field. You know, you can go as imaginative and creative and beautiful as you want with it, but essentially the 21 doors is just the idea that the Fool is our hero, and each door that he opens is another part of the hero's journey. So it's almost like a system, a very simple system of mythology in a way, one mythological tale where one hero goes from the beginning to the end. What I would say about the Fool's Journey is a fantastic way to learn the major arcana, and it really is. It's very all-encompassing, it's very cohesive, and it helps you to just get an idea of a storybook format that you can use to help remember the cards and how they fit together as stages. And that way, when you break them up and you get them in readings, you will remember them from where they are within the Fool's Journey. So I think that's great, and I think it's an obvious and very straightforward way to learn it. What I will say though is that I've used the Fool's Journey for the purpose of the beginner's course, but I'm not entirely sure that it's useful in terms of the potential that the major arcana can offer. So I'm just going to go into this briefly now. Tarot and Psychology, Spectrums of Possibility by Arthur Rosengarten is not a book for beginners. So I'm not making a recommendation of it for this course, although there will be another video where I will talk about recommendations for books that will take you on from this course of study. But in this book, Arthur Rosengarten proposes the idea that all of these different ideas of the Fool's Journey, all the different concepts of it and the way it's broken up and taught, can be quite limiting in terms of the potential for the major arcana. Because time is not just linear, it is also cyclical, and not everybody's journey is going to be exactly the same. So it would be foolish to propose that, looking at the Fool's Journey in a linear story from the magician right through to the world is how everybody is viewed life and is how everybody is living life and is exactly what everybody's going to experience. So even though it does come along in a straight line, it does very much give us this beginning to end format. He does suggest that the Fool's Journey should just be a learning technique. Once you've got the Fool's Journey down and you understand how the cards fit together in a linear fashion from 0 to 22, then you can go ahead and kind of play with it. You can take it apart, you can put it back together, you can have a look at how it factors into your own life, if you see what I mean. And I think that's very important. And in this book he talks about the value of mandalas, or mandalas, however you want to say it. I say mandala. Mandala is Sanskrit for circle, and basically in the Hindu and Buddhist traditions, a lot of the sacred art, or the art that pertained to the transcendental, was made in a mandala kind of format. So you'd have the circle, and then you'd have normally 4 pathways coming out from each part of the circle, which were attached to another circle. And these were used to explain balance and to explain different universal laws, but they were also used to reach a meditative state. You could focus on the mandala and have a look at the very rich, intricate patterns within it, and kind of give yourself that opportunity to expand on your meditation by looking into the mandala and kind of losing yourself in it, in a trance, if you like. People use mandalas for all kinds of things. They use them for consciousness expansion, or just to work out what's going on in their mind. A lot of people just use them for contemplation. A lot of people think they look quite beautiful, but they are supposed to trigger some kind of a response which is meant to build a bridge between the conscious and the unconscious. And in Tarot and Psychology, Arthur Rosengarten talks about perhaps taking the major arcana and making a mandala out of it. And what I would suggest, just to expand on that, is once you've watched this video and you may have taken some notes, or you may have gotten your major arcana out and kind of played with it a little bit, think about the concept of a mandala, go online and have a look at have a look at how they're structured, have a look at that inner circle and then the 4 pathways in the outer circle, and then do 2 exercises for me. The first thing I want you to do is what I'm going to call the unconscious mandala. What I want you to do is turn your 22 major arcana cards around so you cannot see which card you're looking at, and then form a mandala on the ground in front of you. You could start with a cross at the centre of the mandala and then lead out from there, maybe 3 cards each, and then make your outer circle. You can make a pattern that looks a bit more like a circle with a couple of diamonds on either side and then lines up. Doesn't matter how you do it, be creative. Just create a mandala format that looks like it works for you without having a look at any of the cards. Then turn them over and allow yourself to meditate on what they look like. Which cards are at the centre of the mandala? Think about those aspects of those particular cards that are at the centre of you, or maybe aren't at the centre of you and should be. Have a look at the outer circle of the mandala and look what's going on there. How many cards there pertain to your outer life? How many do you feel are out of sync there? How many do you feel you relate to there? Think about the meaning of a mandala and what it actually says about the subconscious, and then have a look at the positions of the cards in the form that they've come up. And just think for a little while about whether or not that mandala actually describes something about you. What kind of weird and wonderful meditative journeys can you go off on just by looking at that mandala and having a look at how the cards have fit themselves together? The next task I want you to do is a conscious mandala, I'll call it, which is where you actually turn the cards over and look at them. And then use the mandala structure to describe yourself using the messages of the majors. So maybe at the middle of the mandala, you'll want to have your core being. So go through the cards and select one card, or maybe a card to cross over it as well, depending on how you feel, which describes your core being. Try doing that. Or maybe you'll want the outer circle of the mandala to represent your relationships with others, and then the more you go into the mandala, the more it's about your relationship with you. You can do it any way you like, you can figure out a format that works for you, but work alongside the tarot cards with these new messages that you have from them and this new understanding of what they mean, and try and describe yourself. Another way is think about your own journey, consider yourself as the fool, and think about the journey that you've actually taken. It may be very, very different to the one in the linear context of tarot, maybe a completely different animal. You may feel that the lessons from the death card pretty much came first for you on your journey towards consciousness. You may feel that the lessons of the Hierophant or the Empress haven't even come yet, so they may not feature in your fool's journey yet. Use the major arcana as a diary of sorts, a journal, or maybe a memoir. Try to illustrate your own particular journey into individuation by using the cards to, show people and show yourself how your journey has gone so far. And feel free to email me about that, about your journeys, or make video responses about your journeys. Tell me which aspects of the tarot actually relate to things you've been through and tell me why, or post it below. And another good exercise that you can do if you have time and you feel the inclination is give one word identities to each card. Look through the cards after you've kind of given yourself a chance to study and absorb the messages, and decide upon one word that you think relates to each card most fully. And it doesn't have to be an adjective, it could be like a doing word. So for example, let's just have a look at one here. Temperance could be the verb relax. Star could be the verb heal, that kind of thing. Or it could be, a very descriptive term, or it could be, as I said, an adjective that pertains to something within the card that you relate to. You could also use other ideas like places you've been to, or moods you get into, or colours if you think about it that way. You can use anything as long as it's something that helps you in terms of looking at the card and immediately thinking of one word that this card kind of pertains to and encompasses and absorbs. I would like you to just go through each one, write a word out for each one, and then see if you can, have a look at the linear structure, put them together and think, okay, how does that move me through a journey? Just that one word. For example, I would think of the devil as being resistance or oppression. That would be the one word that I would assign to the devil. And death for me would be metamorphosis. That would be the one word. But for somebody else, it may be instability, or it may be destruction, or it may be change, could be anything like that. So just think about the words that you would ascribe to each card and have fun with the exercises. And I really hope that this has helped you. And I'm sorry I've stumbled a few times, but this is the longest video I've ever done and I'm not going to be cutting it. So unfortunately, I have stumbled a few times and I haven't been maybe as eloquent as I normally try to be, but I have really enjoyed doing this and I really hope you've all enjoyed learning something from it. And just let me know what your responses have been to it and how you feel about the majors and how you feel the majors describe your life or don't describe your life, and which ones you feel an immediate closeness with, because those tarot cards that when you're learning you feel that immediate closeness with, they're the cards that really makes a tie that binds. For me, I have several cards that I really felt this immediate, almost it was almost psychically driven desire to hold and absorb, and I just felt like I know that card I won't have a problem with. And it's those cards that you really feel a great affection for over time. But remember that when there's a card that you don't feel linked to or you don't feel you can bond with, that's okay too, because those cards are often holding a little message for you personally that you may find yourself often denying or kind of doing away with or putting to one side. So sometimes, like for me, it was the Hierophant card. I never really felt a strong bond to that card. And then about a year ago, I realised for myself that the Hierophant card is a card that I'm uncomfortable with for a reason. It's because it reflects a part of myself that I'm not quite comfortable with or haven't quite gotten in control of yet. So that very much can happen. So value the cards that you don't feel a closeness to, because they're telling you something about yourself too. Thanks for your time, guys. Thanks for listening. Bye.